Welcome to our demonstration of BELLEROPHON Maritime version 2. After installing BELLEROPHON on your PC, pin the applications icon to your Windows taskbar. Now run BELLEROPHON. The BELLEROPHON Maritime login box will then appear. As you can see, this box has two tabs, Login and Login Options. Before typing in the username and password, let's take a look in the Login Options tab. Clicking on any of these checkboxes here will bring the corresponding option alive, like so. As you can see, we have already set up your system to use the BELLEROPHON Database Windows Net server and the BELLEROPHON database. Now go back into the Login tab, and in the username box, type in the username BELLDEMO. I'll continue to use the system username throughout this demo, as this is the username that gives us access to all of the modules within the system. And now type in the password that we have provided you. And now click Login.
BELLEROPHON.
And this effectively takes you into the system. A terminal operating system is essentially an enterprise management system that has been custom designed for the maritime industry. BELLEROPHON is a modular terminal operating system, or TOS, and each of its modules listed here are tailor configured to your terminal. The system has the ability to administer all the work carried out within your terminal, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. Each item of work is defined within BELLEROPHON as an operation. And this is why the system has been classed as an operations-driven system. Each operation is allocated with the required terminal, personnel, vehicles, and equipment resources, and each operation is defined in terms of its average completion time per unit. These operations are then applied to cargo within an order in BELLEROPHON. These orders create the pending work due to be carried out every day within your terminal. And this work is scheduled according to cargo journey and life cycle. This may sound complex, but automation is one of the key aspects of BELLEROPHON. During the pre-installation business analysis, Argonaut Systems will put in place the terminal design, the required operations, and the business flow templates. This will facilitate the automation of order creation, operation scheduling, and resource assignment. And this effectively means that BELLEROPHON will only require a high level of front-end user operation. As we're looking at an overview of the system in this video, I think the best way forward will be for us to consider the two main business flows that are common to most terminals and ports. And that is the receiving and export of cargo, and the import and dispatch of cargo. BELLEROPHON also has a vessel planning module, which is a powerful ship stability system, and this has been designed for planners to ensure that all cargo loaded on board meets the ship requirements. And we'll take a look at this module independently. So let's take a look at how BELLEROPHON manages the arrival of export cargo by road. We'll begin by taking a closer look at the cargo. In BELLEROPHON, items of cargo are called products, and the system has a submodule devoted to the definition of these products. As mentioned previously, the setting up of this data within BELLEROPHON is managed by Argonaut, and this is a task included in the system installation and configuration process. Here we have a standard 20-foot container. As you can see, the structure of each product is recorded in terms of its dimensions, its weight, and its handling requirements. We'll now begin the flow of receiving an export container by truck. So a truck carrying a standard 20-foot container arrives at the road gate of your terminal. This truck arrival has been pre-announced, and the driver hands over the corresponding paperwork over to your member of staff. BELLEROPHON has a check-in-out module that has been specifically designed with maximum user-friendliness, big button controls, and optimum automation. So let's just take a look at that. Okay, the idea behind this design is that this particular module can be used on touchscreen and scan hardware, such as portable data terminals, tablets, and toughbooks, by terminal staff, and eventually by the truck drivers on touchscreen and scan self-service kiosk units. The check-in-out screen is equally at home on your typical desktop PC or Surface Book. The terminal staff will find it requires minimal mouse clicks and keystrokes, and the information is neatly displayed and easy to read. Proceeding with the container delivery, we hit the drop-off button, and the system asks us to confirm which template we'd like to use. So we're looking at a check-in. And at this point, the paperwork is handed over and the terminal staff user enters the details into the fields corresponding to the trucker. The corresponding product reference is then used to display the container details on the screen. The user then hits the check-in button and the system gets on with generating the pending work in the background. As you can see, the system has created two orders. One is responsible for generating the work required to introduce the container to stock into your terminal, and the other is responsible for scheduling the pending work required to load the container on board the vessel responsible for eventually exporting the container. So let's take a brief look at these orders. Okay, so we'll go to our orders list to check out the content of these two orders. Okay, so this is the order that generates the pending work required to effectively drop off the container at the terminal yard. And there's various tabs throughout the order, each containing a wealth of information, and it's a lot to take in, but we'll go through them one by one. Okay, the main information tab is where we have the order type, which is receiving. The transport method section, as you can see, is populated with sea details and road details. So if we have a look at those, and this is the vessel that's been auto-populated by the system, which will eventually be responsible for exporting our product. And this is the details of the trucks. The product information section of the order contains a wealth of information on the cargo itself. including the dimensions, the weights, and all the references you would expect to find. As well as all the ports that are associated with the voyage. And we have a separate tab for each type of operation. For our receiving order here, these will be the Gates tab and the Warehouse tab. The Gates tab will schedule the arrival of the loaded truck and the departure of the empty truck. The Warehouse tab schedules the operation to move the container into a planned location in the yard. And also an operation to carry out a standard container inspection. Bellerophon automatically assigns the required available resources to each of these operations. And this means that the staff, the equipment, and the vehicles required to complete the pending work is allocated correctly. We'll make a quick pit stop on the gang setup module and the operations assignment submodule to help demonstrate this in a little more detail. Bellerophon enables the user to allocate staff members into gangs and to schedule these gangs in accordance with shift patterns and work requirements. As you can see, I've scheduled one particular gang on a 24/7 shift pattern for each day of the year. And within each gang, we have a various selection of roles and various quantities. So let's take a look at operation assignment. Okay, operation assignment lists the orders that we are looking at in the system at the moment for our date range. And it also lists the operation requirements, and it also tells us if they've been fulfilled successfully. So as you can see, in our first order here, the receiving order, we've got a confirms location operation and a standard primary inspection. And these require a reach stacker driver to move the container into its first point of rest in the terminal, and a stevedore to do the inspection. And I can tell just by looking at it at a glance that it's been fulfilled because of this column here. It's quite easy to read and it's easy to use. The next tab over here tells me which gang has been assigned. And similarly then for the equipment that's required. The warehouse operations, both members of staff need a portable data terminal. And this tells me which one has actually been assigned. And similarly, a vehicle is required for the confirms location, a reach stacker. And this tells me that this has been assigned. Okay, so we've taken a quick look at the first automatically added order. Now let's take a look at the second. As you can see, this is an export order. And once again, we have the vessel and voyage details recorded as before. Only this time, the dates of the order correspond to the arrival and the departure of the vessel. And this time, the operations are associated with the loading of the container on board the vessel itself. So we have a warehouse operation to move the container to the quay or to the pier, and we have a port operation to load the container onto the ship itself. These operations, these port operations, are actually scheduled in accordance with the arrival of the vessel. So let's complete the operations on the receiving order. And Bellerophon offers the business two ways of doing this. The administrative user working in the terminal office with a desktop or a Surface Book can use Bellerophon's work list submodule. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so you have three tabs for the three types of operations: port operations, warehouse operations, and packaging. Within each of these tabs, you will find rows of information. Each row corresponds directly to an operation due to be carried out on an individual product. The user simply assigns a specific action code to a row, and this records the pending work as being completed or started or failed. As the gate operations and the inspection operations are very different in their definition, they have their own submodule. However, as the introduction of export cargo by road is a very frequent undertaking for a port, Bellerophon has optimized the automation for this process. As you can see here, we have a checkout scan submodule. And upon loading this submodule, the system maximizes the screen and the display is comprised of big and easy to use controls. The idea here is the same as the check-in out screen, in that it can be used on touchscreen and scan hardware such as portable data terminals, tablets and toughbooks, by terminal staff as well as users in the office. Upon scanning or entering the order number, the data corresponding to the product on the tracker are displayed clearly. And finally, with a single click of the gate out button, all of the pending work is recorded as complete, and the truck is recorded as departed. And we can now go and see that container in stock. There are a few places to view stock in Bellerophon. So let's start by taking a look at the stock overview submodule. This screen lists all cargo that currently resides in your terminal yard. By using the screen's various filters, you can also view the cargo that has once resided in your yard but has now left. And you can also view cargo that is due to arrive at your terminal in the future. Every grid view in Bellerophon is filterable, sortable, groupable, reportable, and exportable. If we simply enter the container number in the search field, our cargo will be filtered accordingly. As you can see, there's a high number of columns containing a wealth of data on each item of cargo or product. And if a user wishes to change the display of any grid view by, for example, reordering the columns so that specific data is always on view, the user can save the display, and then when logging in, the system will use these as the default view. For more intricate detail on the cargo, a double click on the item in Stock Overview will take you to the Products submodule. So let's do that again. and double click on our container. And it takes us directly to the product submodule. And here you will find literally everything about the item. So instead of going to the structure this time, we'll go to colors and stock levels. And as you can see, there's information on each container in each location within the terminal yard. So we have categorization and manufacturer information, structural dimensions and weights, angles of repose, terminal yard location, company ownership, hazardous codes, and repair suppliers. BELLEROPHON also has a product audit trail. So let's use that screen's order product search utility to find our container. So we're looking for our container ID. And with a click of the ellipsis button here, we should find our container. And there it is. There's our order number 200-879. There's our container in the midsection of the screen. And down below, we have the full operational history of the container. From its arrival into the yard through to its inspection. And we also have the operation responsible for eventually loading it on board as well. BELLEROPHON's yard planning submodule is also a useful tool in viewing the stock cargo residing in your yard. So let's have a look at that. And here are the storage areas for the different categories of cargo, such as containers, ro-ro, project cargo, break bulk, and bulk. If we zoom in to the container export yard, we can have a look around for our container. And just by clicking on any of the products that you see, BELLEROPHON pops up a list of all the data associated with each individual item of cargo. Instead of clicking on each of these containers, we'll do a little search. So we'll just filter out our container IDs. And there it is. So if we double click on this container, we should see it highlighted in white on the actual map. And there it is. So if we click on it, the system tells us that there are many items in this area. And do you wish to see the container ID list? So we say yes. So there are 3 containers stacked here in this particular space. And there's ours on the end. So if we click out of this for a second and a right click here, we should be able to view the area stack. So there we have it. And our container is on the top. And so there you have the simple process of introducing an export container into stock. You may be wondering how Bellerophon automatically plans an item of cargo into a specific location within your terminal yard. As well as the system's very efficient auto-planning routine, Bellerophon also has an allocation submodule. So we'll take a brief look at that screen at the moment. As you can see, we've got another map of the yard, and above it we've got a wealth of different options associated with the products themselves, the ports, dimensions, and the bills of lading, and so on. So the system enables you to define various areas, sub-areas, and individual locations in terms of what can and what cannot be planned and stored there. The system also offers the user the ability to manually plan an item of cargo to a specific location by using that same yard planning submodule. So if we have a look at our live allocation here, a lot of sub-areas have specific allocation in terms of the product category. So automatics and ro-ro products have been assigned to the RR sub-area. So if we group this grid view, and just pull this up a bit, we can see what we have. So here we have the areas that have been allocated for autos and ro-ro. Here we have the areas that have been allocated for break bulk. And here we have the container yard. And we also have some areas which have been allocated for general cargo and bulk. One last point is the inspections operations. As I mentioned, these are of a different format to the operations that are listed in the worklist screen. So let's make a quick pit stop in the inspection submodule. As you can see from all the green color coding here, all inspections are passed by default and failed by user selection. The content of an inspection can be as generic or as customized as you need. So let's take a look at our order here for our single container and double click. And here we have standard container inspection checks. External, internal, ceiling, front, floor, left side, right side, back, locking devices. These will be changed for various different types of container, and the setup will reflect that in terms of reefer containers, for example, where there will be temperatures taken and so forth. So on our container here, let's fail a couple of these just to see how we can go about doing that. So let's fail with the floor, and we'll have a hole. And there's also a facility to record images. We'll select these from a file, but of course on a portable data terminal we'll be taking the image directly. And these fields here, again, just standard data, standard test data rather, but Bellerophon has a facility to populate fields, to effectively customize it as you like. I'll just drop by that now just to show you. We've got a lookup maintenance section here, and these are various drop-down list fields. For example, the stock category, defining containers, general cargo, ro-ro, and bulk, etc. And you can also record notes on your inspection. And that covers that. Okay, so we've completed a general overview of Bellerophon, and we have also completed the terminal business flows for both import cargo and export cargo. So I think now would be a good time to take a look at Bellerophon's vessel planning module and see how it fits in to the terminal operating system. Our first port of call for vessel planning in Bellerophon is a visit to the system's vessel and call maintenance submodule, which is in Marine Terminal. As you can see, the screen is divided into three main sections: the main vessel data, the grid view of all the vessels, and finally the voyages, also known as the vessel calls, and these correspond to each selected vessel above. So let's filter the main grid view to find our test data vessel, the Bellerophon. Okay, looking at the top third of the screen, here we have the various fields corresponding to the ship itself, including the vessel code, the IMO number, the call sign, the year of build, the length overall, the length between perpendiculars, the number of decks and holds, the displacement, the draft, the beam, the register of port, and the MMSI number. There are also a series of other tabs here which cover additional data, such as boxes and cranes, and the ability to sort images of the vessel too. The final tab enables the association of the vessel with specific routes. Going back to the main screen, and down to the lower third, you will find the vessel call section, where the voyages for the selected ship are listed. Each voyage has its voyage number, its voyage alias, its previous port, its next port, its estimated date and time of arrival, and its estimated date and time of departure. There are a few other fields common to each voyage, such as your terminal's division, business unit, sub-business unit, and these correspond to the berth that's used by the vessel, and also the third-party stevedore company responsible for discharge and unloading of cargo, if applicable. So the voyage for the Bellerophon ship that we'll be using to demonstrate the vessel planning model is this one here, 189. So now we can move on to the actual vessel planning module itself. As you can see, there are a series of sub-modules here, and each of them is significant. But the logical place to start from a planning perspective is container planning. Okay, so let's load up our test vessel, the Bellerophon. So the system will now load in the vessel profile data. Okay, so now we need to load up our voyage, which of course was the 189. Excuse me. As you can see, the system will now go automatically into view mode and display the bays of the vessel. And you can use the horizontal scroll to zoom in and out. And you can also use the vertical scroll to go up and down. And although the default display is two-dimensional, we can visit the Displays tab and take a quick look at the 3D displays. Here we go. So we just zoom in a little. We can take a look at the whole ship. And by using the mouse, you can move it around at any angle. We go on a bit more. Obviously there's nothing loaded at the moment. Okay, so let's go back into 2D. You can see that the system has displayed the vessel schedule along the top here, where each port of call for the ship is color-coded. So let's load up our vessel call by clicking on it in the schedule. Now the system will load the cargo data into the bay displays and also to the tabs located in the lower section of the screen. And these are comprised of the loading list, the discharge list, the restow list, the remain on board list, the loaded list, the break bulk list, the key list, and so on. We can now take a look at the vessel, the system's version control utility. And this enables the planner to go to different versions of the call. And as you can see, we're using the default one at the moment. We've received a lot of good feedback from the planners on the version control facility. The new version of the vessel is automatically saved every time you action a sail, and the versions are specific to the ports of call. To review all versions of your vessel for a port of call, click on the version control display, and this will pop up. This lists the relevant details on each version, including which planner has created or locked the version, and also has individual details on the containers themselves. Okay. So let's take a closer look at the bays. So if we move in, each of the containers is color-coded to correspond to the vessel calls in the voyage schedule. And when you hover your mouse over the containers in the bays, the system displays a compact pop-up box listing the container ID, the stowage number, the ISO number, the weight, the ports of load and discharge, and the operator. Okay, so let's begin to simulate the planning process. And we'll start by optimizing the bay display. And we'll do this by flipping our cargo list to the vertical right of the screen. Okay. Just drag this out. I've also saved a different grid view display format that makes it easier to read the essential data columns that I need while planning. So I'll just load that up. Okay, so my new grid view, which lists the essential data that I need in terms of the container ID, the ISO code, and the weight, I can now sort into weight order. And so this ensures that I'm using the heaviest containers first and working my way through to the lightest. We can also group this data by any of the columns here, for example. So I've got my container types grouped together. And I can pull it back down. Okay. Another useful feature is the bay selector. And this is a simple way of just selecting the bays you want. If you want to focus on a certain selection of bays, just choose them here. Okay. So now, if we zoom in a little and switch to load mode. So it's just a right click and select load containers. As you can see, the view mode has now changed and is color coded also to tell us that we're in load mode. So if I select my container from the loading list, I then need to click on the required position in the bay that I need, and BELLEROPHON will plan that container to that position. Okay, so if I select my container from the loading list, I then need to click on the required position in the required bay, and BELLEROPHON will plan that container to that position. And there you go. And the reverse is equally as simple. We'll just switch to unload mode, and the system takes us automatically to the loaded list. And we just click on our container again. The container is removed from the display, and it's also removed from the loaded list. And the loading count goes back to 90, and there's our container at the top of the list. So let's just load in a few more. Switch back to load mode. Let's choose a few more 40 footers. And now that we're dealing with the same container type, we can use the drag and drop facility to plan. So if we just drag over the positions that you want to plan the containers to, and then BELLEROPHON will just take them in order of the list and position them on the display. So we'll plan a few more so you can get a feel of how the system works and how simple it is. Let's just view all our bays. And have a look further down the ship. Okay. So if I just drag and drop, as you can see, the loaded list is creeping up as we're planning. and we'll put a few back. Okay. Switch to load. And there you go. Okay, so the data on display in terms of the color coding and the pop-up boxes, etc., they ensure that the planner has everything that he or she needs while moving containers around the vessel. The system will also pop up warnings if you attempt to plan a container incorrectly. For example, if you attempt to load a 40-foot into a 20-foot bay. And we'll take a little look at that now. So if we just choose a 40-footer and try and load it into a 20-foot bay, we get an error message. Box load error, no space in position. And there's the error log. The error and warning tabs will automatically populate with these pieces of information, as well as the on-screen information from Bellerophon when the planner attempts to make this type of erroneous action. And this is a brief overview on how Bellerophon's vessel planning module works from a planner's perspective. And when the planning of the vessel is complete, the automatic creation of the order is just a button click away. Using this button here, the Create Terminal Order button, which will fully automate the creation of the import-export order that we saw earlier in the demonstration on the terminal operating system side of things. Okay, so after completing our planning, we can now sail to the next port in our vessel schedule. And this is just a button click away. So in the first voyage data tab, we've got a button along the top, sail to next. So if we just click on that, and we get a warning saying, are you sure this will close the call? So just proceed. We've got a few messages in the warnings log, and we'll take a look at those, but we'll go ahead with the sail. Would you like to clear the next call prior to sailing? Clear. And the system proceeds to create the arrival condition at the next port along in the schedule. And we should see the yellow dot move from the port that we're on at the moment over to the next one. Sailing complete. Loading the next call. And there you go. And that completes the process. Okay, so having taken a look at how Bellerophon's container planning submodule works, I think it'll be a good idea to take a look at how the vessel profile is set up and stored in the system. So let's just take a look at the vessel profile submodule. And here's our Bellerophon 189. Okay, so here's all the data corresponding to the profile of the vessel. And we'll take a brief look at each of these tabs. First of all, we have level 1, which is the bay plan. And the first tab is the general particulars. In here you'll see all of the fields associated with the physical structure of the ship. And moving along to the bay plan, you'll see 3 sub-tabs, and starting with the bay structure. And this shows the data corresponding to each bay on the left, with a two-dimensional display of the bay itself on the right. You can also switch to 3D here just by clicking on the checkbox. And once again, just zoom in and out on the horizontal bar. And you can move it around using your mouse. If we move across to the bulkheads and hatch lids, you'll see that this provides us with a visual display of the hatch lids on the vessel. You can move from head to head within the various data sections, and this movement will be reflected on the vessel display itself. And finally, the full bay view tab. It shows all of the bays on the vessel in one display. And again, this is available in 2D and 3D. And you can move that around as well using your mouse. Okay. So moving on to the hazardous compliance tab. The planner can select the permitted classes for each space and hold. Just with a click of a button. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the level 2 and the level 3 stability and stress. And a majority of these displays is comprised of numerical data. As you can see, in level 2 we have a wealth of data on the vessel's stability, comprising of hydrostatics, the frame spacing, the cross curves of stability, the weather criteria, and the tanks, and finally the stores. And at level 3 we have the data on the vessel's stress, comprising of the scaling on the shear force, the bending moment and torsional moment, the Bongian curves, and finally the lightweight distribution stations and blocks. Okay, following on from our pit stop into the vessel profile, let's take a look into the condition view submodule. Okay, this screen presents the stress and stability data in an easy to read format through a series of simple tabs. Starting with the detailed stability results tab, you can see the screen is divided into 3 main sections. First, we have each item of data displayed in the stress and stability results section, along with any warnings that the planner needs to be aware of. And over to the right, we have the stress and stability summary, which is basically a dashboard showing the shear force, the bending moment, the torsion, the metacentric height, the dead weight, the longitudinal center of flotation draft, the displacement, as well as general condition data. And finally, in the lower section of the screen, you have the GZ curve. Plotting the righting lever and the angle of heel. And the next tab over displays the data corresponding to the International Maritime Organization's code on recommending stability criteria and other measures for ensuring the safe operation of vessels, to minimize the risk to ships and the personnel on board and to the environment. And finally, we have the summary of data tab, which is a basic grouped grid view display showing stability information on the containers and on the tanks. And over to the condition view tab, excuse me, we have the line of sight from the bridge, which is displayed in 3D, along with various other view controls. And we can control that just by use of the zoom and the mouse. And these are various toggle buttons. You can show the sea or not. Empty slots. Okay, and over to the Tanks and Stores tab. Here we have a grid view listing the data on the stores and crew effects. And once again, we have the stress and stability summary. And in the lower section of the screen, we have the comprehensive grid view listing all of the tank data, including a facility to import and export the tank statements. Okay, getting back to the container planning, let's now read in a cargo list file for our vessel and voyage. And in our example here, I'm going to read in a plan master file. Plan master being one of our older and very popular ship stability systems. So my current port is Basadera, and my container lists are populated accordingly. So to load in my PML file, we go to Import Export and Import PM Cargo List Facility. So we want to select the ports and we'll choose the file. Use storage locations, no. And the system will begin to load in the container data. And we're saying no to the pop-ups because we're going to look at these options individually. Okay, so there's quite a lot of container data here. And the tanks. Okay, 378 containers read in just over a minute. Right, following the file import, the containers in the cargo list file now populate the bay displays and also the container list grid views in the lower section of the screen. So now I can begin to plan our loading and our discharging and our restores in the same way as I demonstrated earlier. So we can now follow exactly the same process. So the first step would be to put my screen format in the way that I like it. So I'll flip my list data vertically. And I'll choose my grid view display for loading. Great. I'll just zoom in a bit more. Okay. And I can sort the weights of my containers. And I can begin loading in the same way. So we'll just do that now. I won't spend a huge amount of time doing it. I'll just plan a few containers just to refresh your memory on how simple BELLEROPHON makes this process for the planner. So, okay, we'll go into plan mode, into load mode, and choose some areas here. And there you go. Let's choose some different containers. Let's do a little bit of grouping here on the grid view. So we've got the various different sizes of container. So we've got some 20 footers here sorted in weight. So we go back up to the first bay and here you go. Okay. As you can see there, as before, the loaded tab is being populated as we load in our containers. In fact, we can, I think there's pretty much enough spaces for those. Yes, great. So yeah, we're getting a good feel of the system now and how simple it is. I mean, it's just a simple case of drag and drop, and the containers, as you can see, if we zoom in a bit, we've got all the information we need in terms of the ports that these containers are going to, where they're being discharged, and if we hover the mouse over it, we get a full go back into view mode, hover the mouse over it, and we get a pop-up telling us the various different pieces of information about each container. We zoom out again. Okay, so we move down a bit, have a look at okay. Go back into load mode. There you go. And it's as simple as that. So, following the completion of the actual planning, what we can do is then proceed to create a terminal order. Which is done with this button here. Okay, so before creating the terminal order, I've arrived at a stage where I've finished my planning, my loading list is empty, my containers are loaded. What I'll do next is I'll go back to my condition view and make a few checks. So this is my line of sight. I'm not a planner, and that's pretty evident there, but I've tried to put the containers on in a sort of sensible order. I'm not too sure if it is a sensible order, but we're now in a stage, hypothetically, where we can revert back to planning and proceed with the creation of the terminal order. So if you just click this button and choose our template, which is import export, and hit OK. And the system just gives us a pop-up confirmation message. Just hit on yes, and away it goes. Okay, so the system's created our terminal order 200.881, with the items concerned. So if we click on yes to go and view that order, here it is. The system takes it right there. As you can see, the template that we use has populated all the fields that we'd expect in terms of the type of order that it is, the division and business unit and sub-business unit of your business structure, and the vessel concerned, and the dates and times associated with the ship arriving at berth. Okay, so as well as populating the main information tab, the order creation process that we've just been through, that we've just completed, also populates a number of other tabs in the order. And the first one is the product information tab. And as you can see, each item of cargo that we're dealing with on the order is listed here, and each item of cargo is populating the above section here, and you've got a wealth of information on each product in terms of its weight, its unique markings, its container ID, its dimensions, its length, width, height, and the information that you'd expect there, the ports in terms of the port of load and the port of discharge, and the product companies. Moving on, we've got the types of operations also populated in their own tabs. So we'll start off with the port operations, and we'll group each operation type. And as you can see, we've got three types of operation here. We've got discharge container, we've got load container, and we've got restow container. So the discharge container operation is responsible for recording the imported containers being successfully discharged off the berthed vessel. And each of these operations has been added automatically, scheduled automatically, and sequenced automatically in accordance with the vessel's visit and your terminal's resource availability. The next one, these are in alphabetical order, but the next one in sequence would be the restow operation here. And the restow is responsible for recording the movement of onboard containers in preparation for the loading of the export containers into position on the berthed vessel. And finally, the load container operation. And as you'd expect, this is responsible for recording the successful loading of the export containers onto the berthed vessel. Okay, so moving over onto the warehouse operations tab. And similarly, we've got, if we group here, we've got three types of operation here as well. We've got confirm location, we've got move container to key, and we've got standard primary inspection. And these are listed alphabetically as well here because I've grouped them. But the natural sequence of events would be to confirm the location of the discharge container, and then to subject it to its standard primary inspection, and then to move the containers to the key in preparation for loading on board. So let's expand here. As you can see, the confirms location is responsible for recording each item of imported cargo, each container, being successfully moved into its planned first point of rest location within the terminal. And the standard primary inspection is responsible for recording the standard inspection of each item of imported cargo. And finally, the move container to key operation, and that's responsible for recording the movement of the export containers from their locations in the terminal to the key side in preparation for loading. And all of these operations have been scheduled automatically and sequenced automatically. Okay, we'll now take a look at the processing of the operations created by this order, and we'll highlight the pending work for a crane operator. So keeping the demo consistent, we'll consider these operations being completed by an admin user from within Bellerophone's work lists submodule. So I'll just open that up. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, one of the useful features throughout Bellerophon is its Display Save tab. So I'm now going to call on a display format that I previously saved, and this would suit a crane operator using a portable data terminal. Upon loading the display, any unimportant columns to the crane operator are removed, and the most important columns are justified to the left. Another helpful feature for the crane operator is that the container operations are grouped into discharge, into restow and load. So we'll move back up to the top. And also within each group, the individual containers are sorted into sequence order number. Although we're looking at this from the crane operator's perspective, there are other pending operations for completion by other members of staff. And we've got the operations that we looked at in the order, starting off with the confirms location, the container inspection, and the move container to key. And the inspections, as we know, is covered in a separate module because it's different in nature. But the move container to key operation is a warehouse operation. It's listed here as well. So to cover a few more bases in terms of actually using the system, we'll now complete a few of these and take a look at how Bellerophon automates the process of recording this work. As I previously mentioned, these operations had been sequenced. So let's take a look at the sequencing submodule for a much larger volume of cargo. As we are planning and assigning the workload for the crane operators, I think the best way forward here would be to use the sequencing module's crane splits feature. And this is an extremely user-friendly way of assigning the work and automatically sequencing the cargo movements required. So let's go to the tab. And as you can see, our voyage is preloaded. And toward the top here are the operations for the crane operator. And they've been grouped. So we've got discharge container, load container, and restow container. Okay, so instead of setting up our sequence groups, we'll visit the crane splits tab and let this feature do the work for us. So as you'd expect from a crane splits management facility, this screen shows a side view of our vessel, along with a color-coded display of the cargo corresponding to our voyage. In the lower section of the tab, you have the bays that require servicing by the cranes and a timeline. There are also some useful options enabling the user to select the start position and direction of work, the operational times and the number of moves per hour. And by assigning a crane to a specific selection of bays, it can't be more simple. Just drag your mouse over your bay selection and then hit the Add Crane button. So if we start with bays 37 and 35 and 33 and 31, working from left to right and front to back. We start at 8 AM and we'll finish at 2000. Okay. And now just hit the Add Crane button and choose our crane, Gantry Crane 1. And it's color coded accordingly. So 100% of the work that we've done so far is for Gantry Crane 1, servicing bays 37, 35, 33, and 31. Okay, so we'll go on to our second selection of bays, and we'll choose 29 to 19. Add crane, and we'll choose Gantry Crane 2. And there you go. And thirdly, we'll choose up to bay 11, add crane, Gantry Crane 3. Okay, so let's expand a bit here, that's better. And our final selection of bays, we'll work from the other direction. Add crane and Gantry Crane 4. And the key box is updated accordingly here. This work assignment is now automatically sequenced by Bellerophon in accordance with the current positions of the import containers on the ship and the planned positions of the export containers on the ship. So let's take a look at the sequencing tab. Okay, so if we go to the sequencing tab, and here we have the automatically generated sequence groups. Now these correspond directly to each of our 4 gantry cranes. The bigger grid view to the right lists the container moves for the cranes to make. And this list contains a wealth of data, including the sequence number, obviously, the container ID, and each container's base stack tier location and planned location. Bellerophon uses this data to populate the work list screen and also the screen on the mobile app's displays. So we'll now revert back to our work list screen. Okay, so back to work lists, and after our sidetrack visit to crane split sequencing, we can see that the new sequence order has been put in place. As we are logged in as a super user, we are now looking at all of the pending work for all 4 crane operators. So this sequencing order column is auto-populated for all 4 drivers. So that's why there's some duplication here. So before we complete a couple of these operations, let's take a look at the marine gauge screen for our vessel voyage. Okay, so in marine gate, let's find our vessel. There she is. And our voyage 189. Okay, so the orders associated with our vessel and voyage are listed in the center here. And down below, we've each item of cargo corresponding to the tab, whether it's to load, to discharge, to restow. And we've got an overview of everything here as well. So let's now simulate the arrival of the vessel, a process that will also be automated. So first of all, we'll make a quick pit stop in berth management. Okay, so if we load it up, great. What we have here are our two piers, our two keys, and our vessel and voyage. So if we right click and we choose our berth, and now we choose our key split, key splits, and confirm, and our vessel is now switched over to the plan tab. So we double click on it. Here's our vessel along a timeline. So we can now position our ship, and we can choose the direction that she's coming in, and we can move it to a certain position like so, and we can save. Great. So as before, we'll override the auto recording of our vessel's arrival here by clicking on the button. Okay, so our ship has been changed to status arrived. So now we'll look at discharging a few of our containers using the work list screen. So if we just switch back, and I filtered out some of the discharge operations here, so we'll begin by just choosing one. I'll show you the marine gate screen. So we just do as you can see, we're still 0 loaded, 0 discharged, and 0 restored. So if I do a refresh now after making that assignment of operation code, you can see that 1 has gone from to discharge and is now in discharged. And that's as simple as it is, basically. In work lists, as you assign action codes and refresh, they are moved from one tab to the other. And in the overview, you'll see them also reflected as discharged in here. So it's not as cumbersome as that. We can multi-select. So if we move to action multiple, enable multi-select, choose our operation status action code, select all, apart from the ones that we've already done, and action. And the system will go through and assign the action codes to the ones that we have actually multi-selected. And as it's doing that, the status of each product, each item of cargo is being changed from to discharge to discharged. So that's reflected then in Marine Gate. It's just coming to the end of that now. Okay, so we'll have a look at Marine Gate and do a refresh. And you can see that there's none left to discharge, and they've all been discharged. And it's a similar process for the loading and the restows. Obviously, I've done them all in one go. In reality, the sequence order column will control the order that the crane operator performs each operation and each action code assignment. So at the end of the crane operator's work, the pending work, all of the loading will be in loaded, all of the to discharge will be in discharged, and all of the restow will be in restowed, and it'll be reflected in the overview accordingly. So after completing our operations in work lists, this is what the marine gauge screen will look like. We'll have nothing left to load, nothing left to discharge, and nothing left to restow. And the containers that were previously in those tabs are now in the loaded tab, in the discharge tab, and in the restored tab. And the overview will reflect that as well. Okay, so now that those operations have been completed, the remaining operations on the imported products can proceed in terms of the confirms location and the inspection. And what we are in a position to do now here in the marine gauge screen is to actually manually sail the vessel. Again, this will be automated in the live system when the vessel crosses the perimeter on her way out. This will be done automatically via an action firing, but now we'll manually click here. Okay, so it's been recorded as being sailed. So if we now go to our extra functions, and this gives the opportunity for the waterways management to have closure on a vessel's visit into your port. So we can set the call as being finalized. And that's the end of the process. So what we can do now is take a look at our stock overview, because imported products would be in stock and exported products would have left stock. So let's take a look at that now. Okay, so let's go to stock overview, and let's do a quick filter on our order number. And there we go. And this is the list of products that we've just imported off our BELLEROPHON vessel and their planned locations of where they reside on the yard. And you can also see this in the other usual places, such as yard planning. But essentially, this completes the process of the terminal order being generated by vessel planning. So we hope you enjoyed the demonstration of BELLEROPHON Maritime. And if you have any questions or any queries or need any information, please don't hesitate to contact us.